God of our days and of our nights, of our coming and our going, bless each of us, we pray, in the meditation of our hearts. Speak, O Lord, we your servants listen. Amen. Well, welcome to this most holy of nights, the Easter Vigil, a night where we tell our story, we relive traditions, and when possible, we baptize those to our faith community. This is the most important night of the year for us as Christians, and I am extremely honored to be here with you this evening. I think some of you already know me, but I'm Father Rick. I'm the chaplain over at the Covington, and I've usually am here at some of the high holy days, a little bit sometimes in between throughout the year with different events, and so it's my joy to really be here to celebrate such an honorable occasion with you. On February 27th, 1991, at the height of Desert Storm, Ruth Dillion received a very sad message from the Pentagon. They said her son, Clayton Carpenter, private first class, had stepped on a landmine and was killed in Kuwait, and he was dead. Now I don't know if you can imagine as a mother, for some of us as parents who've got kids, Ruth Dillow wrote in her memoirs later on that I was sharing and reading, she said, I cannot begin to describe my grief, my shock. I hurt. The inside of me had collapsed, exploded, it opened up. It was almost as if I could not bear the emotions. And for 3 days, I expressed nothing but anger and loss. For 3 days, people tried to come and comfort me in so many wonderful, loving ways. For 3 days, the loss was so great, I was just overwhelmed. And probably those of you as parents or had experienced any kind of loss can relate to what Ruth was going to. But after 3 days, Ruth received a message. The phone rang, and in her disgust, and she was home alone, she went to pick up the phone, and she was about to yell into the phone, and she hears, Mom, it's me. I'm okay. I'm alive. I know you've heard differently. And at this point, you kind of hear something on the phone. It's like she was about to explode. Is this a joke? And she was about to scream at the person, but the softness of the voice, the tone, she knew immediately this was her son. She couldn't believe it at first. She said, I just could not believe it. If it wasn't the sound that I knew from the day I've been changing diapers and raised this young man and sent him off, I will never forget his voice. And it changed everything in a flash. She found out the earlier message she had received was a mistake, and there was another family obviously grieving someplace. But she said, I laughed, I cried, and things were, I wanted to do cartwheels all over the house. I was so excited because my son, whom I thought was dead, is alive. I can't wait to see him. I want to hug him and never let him go. This evening, we have been on a journey. We've gone through scripture, prophecies. We have sung psalms. We've listened to canticles and stories. So many things we have shared on our story, our journey in this long story of us, the history of God's intervention in the lives of God's people for over thousands and thousands of years. Even through the darkness of death, we have not been abandoned. As we have listened to these stories over how people have changed and they were caught into darkness, but somehow, even with Moses and others, they found light. They were not left as abandoned or orphaned. We began our celebration this evening outside with one of the most primitive of lights, the fire. It protected people. It kept people warm. It cooks food. It does so many things for us. It was a service of light, and from that we lit our candles. We lit our Paschal candle, which journeys with us from our baptism, when we're new and young, to the point where we're at our death and we're having our funerals. The service of light, which symbolizes Jesus rising from the dead and bringing light to all of us. It is the light of Christ that is shone out into the world, scattering darkness forever. Now, we started our stories this evening, as you've heard wonderfully as they were read, stories of creation, seeing God who created the heavens and the earth and all that is within it, even creating us, we hear in the stories. We have watched with Moses as he obeyed and he agonized, journeying with his people, moving forward. And we have come through the waters of the Red Sea, safe. And this evening, as we have come together with Old Testament stories and stories of the New Testament, our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community are celebrating Passover, reading many of the same stories, listening to their journey, sharing in symbols like we are doing. We have listened to the words of Ezekiel and other psalms, reassuring us, themselves and us and them, and over again, that the love of God is steadfast, no matter what happens in our world. We look around in our media, the news, and there's so much going on. We've got Christians as refugees, not just 100 here, a few there, but by the thousands and the millions in many parts of the world. Things have not really changed much. We've got slavery at its greatest than it's ever been in history. We live in a world where everything is transitory, where we can lose our youth, where we lose our looks and our energy, where our children grow up too fast and they leave us, where jobs are suddenly taken away from us, where even the amazing technology of computers is constantly changing, leaving us breathless. And yet, with all of the changes, all the things we see in the news every day, we wonder, what is this year going to bring for us? We are left assured of one thing that is unchanging in our realities, that God's love is steadfast. It is this same love that brings us through these terrible days and nights that are captured in the words that we have been praying in our creed every Sunday, that he was crucified, dead, and buried, but we don't remain there in that darkness. Have you ever felt a fear? Have you ever known, like Ruth, the story I gave you in the beginning, have you ever known the rush of blood that chokes you and kind of drops you out and you just kind of wonder, ay. You feel like, where's my world? Where's the rest of this day going to go from here? I remember many years ago when I was working as a missionary in Ghana, West Africa. I was building clinics and a variety of other things we were doing. And I was working in the higher elevations of the country where the jungles were pretty deep. And at night, things got kind of cool. So you would take a little blanket with you just to cover up on your bed or whatever we were sleeping on. And I was at a place where we were building a clinic, and we had a school going on at the same time. And there was no electricity for many miles far to be seen. So we used these Chinese kerosene lanterns, the kind where you have the globe, and you have to put a little match to light and get it going, and you want to protect that little mantle inside. If it cracks, you're in trouble. Well, I came into the little place that was set for me to live in for the night. It was made of mud and straw and with a thatched roof. And I came in, and as I always do, you check around for critters and creatures and animals of whatever size. This is deep jungle stuff. And so I came in, and I was ready to settle down. And at that point, I had put the kerosene lantern on a table just a few feet away from the little bed that I was going to sleep on, and looked around one last time, because when the light goes out, it's dark. I mean, it's dark. Even in the tall trees of the jungle, you don't even see the beautiful stars, and there was no moon that night. So I put out the light, and I went and laid down. I'm like, it feels so good. Now, I like to sleep on my side with this little blanket. There's this kind of, on your side, you get this kind of little cove around where your legs are kind of pulled up to your chest. And I'm laying there, and I'm, getting not really a restless person, but I wanted to go to the other side. And for some reason, the blanket would not roll with me. It was not letting me turn to the other side. And as I'm laying there, I began to think of a story one of the old missionaries that I was living with. He told me a story, kind of give me some survival skills when you get out there. He said, now don't forget old Father so-and-so, Clem, whose car broke down a couple months ago, and he got outside the car and slept with a little blanket on the road. And when he woke up in the morning, he couldn't move either. And there was this giant snake that warmed up along the side of his body, the whole length of his body. So I'm laying there in the dark of the night on my little blanket thinking, oh my, I've got my own snake story. And when in the darkness of the night, how our minds race around, and we're all over the place. This snake became huge. It was a big python. Could have been a cobra, might have been a mamba, a green mamba, or one of the black ones, because I've seen these things, big, fast, nasty snakes. Now, I don't know about you, if you've ever been pinned in a situation, you get an itch, like on your nose, or you're in your leg, or someplace where you have to touch, where you're not supposed to be, and I'm like trying to figure out, my legs were cramping, and I really wanted to move. But my mind said there was this massive snake coiled up right where my body was, not letting me go. So as a few minutes went by in the dark of night, I am totally frightened at this point, thinking of all the worst things that I have seen in the jungle so far. It was on top of my blanket, and I'm not calling for help. There's no phones. This is 1980. Definitely no cell phones. So I said, I can't stay here all night. My legs are really now cramping, and with one flash of all my arms under the blanket, I whipped this little blanket across the room, and about 9-10 feet across, I hear this little cat scream. I go, what was that? Now I get out of bed realizing this is really bizarre. So I light a little match, light my little kerosene lantern, and in the light as it's starting to come back, I see this little kitten staring at me as shocked as I was shocked looking at him, like, where did you come from? This is not a place for kittens to be for at all. Cats were not common. But the light brought definition back into my world. In the darkness, my fears, the greatest of worries, my mind raced to the biggest of demons, of snakes of all kind of sizes, and like I said, I've seen them all. But this little bit of light, this one match, which went to my kerosene lantern, it brought the definition back into my world to see this little life of a kitten who was equally frightened, like, whoa, wait a minute. The one safe bed I find for the night, you're attacking me, this poor little thing. While each of us has his or her own fears, a set of worst fears, we can generalize them as I did. We can see how our own fears and the stories of others, we can fear the fear of death. We can fear the separation of our lives with those we love. We can fear life has no meaning. We can fear the wrath of God. These fears are real, and they do haunt us. They follow us and grow huge in the dark of night. These are enormous fears, as we've been listening to many of our readings for us, the creation of the world and all these wonderful things we've been singing. But from the earliest of the church traditions, there is a sequence of these readings that we have tonight, because there is a story of renewal. There is a gift of salvation, the gift of new heart for you and me, a new spirituality, a promise of life and restoration for us as families and friends. It is this release from fear that causes the psalmist and our choir that has sung for us and lifted up our voices loudly as well to sing for joy, to maybe even dance to the new Lord, a song. We rang bells. We brought new sound in cacophony of a lot of things because we wanted to waken up that the darkness is a passing thing, that in our minds, our hearts and our bodies, that whatever sounds, even if it is just one note we hit on the piano over and over again, it can be lovely to a mother who's listening to her child make that first note. It is an awesome sound. The three women in our gospel came to the tomb wondering, who is going to roll away the stone? Who? Is it going to be those Roman soldiers? They're already our captors. They don't like us. They're just going to pick on us, and gosh, who knows what else they'll do? What fears did those ladies have as they went to the tomb? We get a hint in those questions. Who will roll away the stone? But there at the mouth of the cave, they are met by a wonderful surprise. It is a fearful sight at first because they are confronted once again with the unknown. The familiar body is gone. Their loved one, their task of taking care of this man who's been their best friend, their lover, their closest one who's kept him from being in the dark, he's missing. He's not there. Both the women and the guards of the tomb see this blank space. And the angel says to the women, do not be afraid. The first words, do not be afraid. The women listen to the wondrous words of the promise-filled, and they're told to run to the others to bring this light of news, the story, that your lives, he has not abandoned you at all. Your lives are moving with greater light. They ran with fear, but with great joy. And that's the important part, that there is always a little fear in great joy. And so are we to use these joys as we too run, knowing that there are dark moments in our life. Sometimes it might feel like a lot of darkness is around us, but where can we stop and hold on to the light that might be just creeping in? In the darkness of our room, we create creatures bigger than ourselves. And those women permitted the tomb to be opened. They allowed faith and hope to triumph. Faith, hope, and love are those three great Christian virtues. And here we celebrate those on our Easter Eve, on our Holy Saturday, the triumph of faith, hope, and love, which brings light into all kinds of darkness. We wait for the expectation. We are full of hope. And with the fullness of Easter, the holy presence becomes tangible to each of us, to our families, to our country, and to others. And it is for us to not only stay here tonight to be enlightened by the word, but like those women, to run out and to find Peter, to find the others of the crowd, the disciples, and say, wow, you wouldn't believe what we have just experienced. What comforting words this strange person said. Do not be afraid. What energizing words. We have seen the Lord. Remember what was said at the beginning. The message that comes through to us at the readings of this Easter Vigil is this, that we have not been abandoned. We are loved with a steadfast love. Thanks be to God.